The coffee in Dr. Hannah Collins' travel mug had gone cold hours ago, but she kept sipping anyway, more out of habit than need. 14 hours at St. Mary's Hospital, 3 emergency surgeries, 2 consults, 1 impossible loss, and still she stayed upright, fueled by nothing but caffeine and guilt. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, the kind of sound that burrowed into your skull and never left. She checked the clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m. Her shift was over, but the silence that followed her out of the hospital felt heavier than the exhaustion in her bones. Outside, Boston's October air bit through her damp scrubs. The sky was a restless, shifting gray, half rain, half shadow. She crossed the nearly empty parking lot, sneakers echoing on wet asphalt, and for a fleeting second, she thought about what she'd give just to feel nothing. Her hands trembled as she dug for her keys. The sound of metal clinking against metal seemed to echo louder than it should have. She was halfway to her car when the first drops fell, soft, tentative at first. Then in a heartbeat, the sky broke open. The downpour was merciless. Cold needles of rain soaked her hair, her clothes, everything. She ran, but the lot was slick. Her sneaker caught on a crack in the asphalt. She fell hard. Her knees slammed into the ground. Pain flared up her legs. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth where she'd bitten her lip. She stayed there, on her knees in the middle of the empty lot, rain pounding down on her, hands pressed to the pavement, the world blurring through tears and water. And just like that, something inside her gave way. "I did everything right," she whispered. "Everything, and she still died." The rain drowned out her voice, but she said it again anyway. "I did everything right." It had been 2 years since that day in the operating room. 2 years since the monitors screamed a flat line that still echoed through her dreams. Maria Grimaldiro, 62. Routine valve repair. No warning signs. No missteps. One moment alive, the next gone. The review board called it an unforeseeable cardiac event. But Hannah didn't believe in coincidences. Not when she could still feel the weight of that woman's still heart beneath her palms. She had done everything right, but right hadn't been enough. Now, whenever the rain fell, she swore she could still hear the sound of that flatline, steady as thunder, cruel as truth. The tears came harder, the kind that burned, the kind that made her shake. For 2 years, she'd kept her grief tucked away, behind surgical masks, behind steady hands, behind the smile she wore for patients' families when she told them their loved ones were going to be okay. But tonight, alone under the storm, all that strength crumbled. She stayed like that for a long time, kneeling, crying, breaking. By the time she pulled herself up, her knees were bleeding, her hands raw, and her heart an open wound. She staggered into her car, slammed the door, and sat there as her breath fogged the glass. The rain beat against the windshield like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She didn't start the engine right away. She just breathed, or tried to. When she finally made it home, it was past midnight. Her apartment was small, too quiet, the air stale from a week without opening the windows. The space smelled faintly of lavender detergent and loneliness. She stripped out of her wet scrubs, showered until the water turned pink from her scraped knees, then wrapped herself in her late father's old sweater, the one that still carried the faintest scent of cedar and comfort. She made tea she wouldn't drink and sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The rain outside softened to a whisper. At 3:15 a.m., sleep still wouldn't come. The ghosts never let her sleep on nights like this. So she reached for her laptop. Her fingers moved on instinct. They knew the path by heart. Maria Grimaldiro obituary. She'd read it so many times she could recite it word for word. Beloved mother of Lucas Grimaldiro. known for her generosity, her warmth, her tireless devotion to the community. It was that name, Lucas, that always hit hardest. She remembered him from the funeral. Tall, silent, all sharp lines and grief he never let out. He'd stood like a statue, while people offered condolences he clearly didn't want. Hannah hadn't gone up to him. She'd stood in the back pew, hidden behind her sunglasses, watching his world collapse because of her hands. She hadn't been brave enough to face him. But tonight, staring at that obituary again, something shifted. The words Oak Ridge Cemetery sat at the bottom of the page like a whisper. She'd never gone. Never let herself. But maybe it was time. Before her brain could talk her heart out of it, she was up, pulling on jeans, grabbing her coat, and heading for the door. Boston was asleep. The city lights glowed faintly against the mist as she drove north, past shuttered storefronts and empty sidewalks. A gas station clock blinked 4:12 a.m. She stopped at an all-night grocery store. The only flowers they had were white lilies. Clean, pure. The kind you brought to graves when you didn't know what else to bring. The drive to Oak Ridge took 40 minutes. The cemetery gates stood open. Dew clung to the grass, and the world felt suspended between night and morning. She parked near the back, the lilies trembling in her hand as she walked. The rows of headstones stretched endlessly, each one a story that had ended too soon. She found it easily. Maria Teresa Grimaldero, engraved in black granite with gold lettering. Beloved Mother. That was all it said. Hannah knelt in the damp grass. Cold soaked through her jeans, but she didn't care. She brushed away the fallen leaves and traced the carved letters with her fingertips. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't save you." The words felt fragile in the morning air, barely strong enough to carry, but they left her chest lighter all the same. "I don't know if you can hear me," she continued softly, "but I think about you every day. I still hear the monitors in my dreams. I still see your face when I close my eyes. And I just want to say I'm sorry." The wind answered with a soft sigh through the oak branches. She stayed like that until the sky began to change, black fading to gray, then gold. The world waking up again. And for the first time in years, she felt something inside her loosen. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. She rose, her jeans soaked, her knees stiff, and placed the lilies in the vase built into the headstone. "I'll come back," she promised quietly. "Every week, if I have to, until I can breathe again." When she turned back toward her car, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the marble rows in soft gold. The sight stopped her. So much stillness. So much peace. And as she walked, she found herself thinking, maybe that's what healing looks like. Not some grand revelation. Just the courage to return to the places that hurt until they stop bleeding. Because maybe that's all forgiveness really is, the quiet act of showing up again and again until the pain learns your name and stops fighting you. And she wondered, as the morning light caught in her wet hair, if you could go back to one place, speak to one person you lost, what would you say? Would the words come easy, or would they break you first, the way they broke her? She didn't know it yet, but someone else had been visiting that same grave. Someone who had watched her kneel there in the rain. Someone whose life and heart was about to collide with hers in ways that would change everything. The following morning at St. Mary's, Hannah moved through her shift like a ghost wearing a white coat. Rounds, charts, surgical updates, conversations with anxious families. It was all muscle memory now, her body performing medicine while her mind replayed dawn in the cemetery, the whisper of "I'll come back." She did come back. The next Wednesday, before sunrise, she found herself driving the same empty roads out of Boston, the city still cloaked in gray fog. The bouquet of lilies lay on the passenger seat again, stems wrapped in damp paper. It should have felt strange, even morbid, but instead there was peace in the routine, something sacred about keeping her promise. Oak Ridge was empty at that hour. The world smelled like dew and earth, like beginnings. She knelt, replaced last week's wilted lilies with new ones, cleaned fallen leaves from the stone, and sat cross-legged in the wet grass. She spoke aloud, softly at first, unsure if it was prayer or penance. "It's been 2 years," she told the grave. "They said it wasn't my fault, that sometimes hearts just stop. But that doesn't help, does it? Knowing it was no one's fault doesn't make it hurt less." Her breath fogged in the cold air. A bird called from the oak branches above. She smiled faintly. "I saved a man yesterday. Triple bypass. Complicated. He'll see his grandkids again. That's something, right? Maybe you'd be happy to know that." It was absurd, talking to stone, but it helped. She stayed until the sky turned gold again, then drove back to the hospital in time for morning rounds, a fresh calm sitting where guilt usually lived. That calm stayed with her the rest of the day. Even Megan Foster, her best friend since residency, noticed. "Okay," Megan said over coffee, squinting at her. "You're smiling. That's suspicious." Hannah arched a brow. "I smile. Not like this." "Spill." "New medication? Secret boyfriend?" "Neither," she said, smiling for real now. "Just trying something different. Whatever it is, keep doing it. You look almost human again." Almost. By the 3rd week, her visits had become ritual. Wednesday mornings at dawn. Fresh flowers. Quiet conversations. The whisper of wind through oak leaves. Each visit loosened something in her chest. The guilt was still there, always would be, but it had started to shift, reshaping itself into something less sharp. Something she could breathe around. On the 4th Wednesday, when she arrived, the cemetery looked different. The air colder, the light thinner. She knelt as usual, placing the lilies in the vase, brushing frost from the granite. "It's nearly your anniversary," she said softly. 2 years next week. Everyone says time heals, but I think maybe time just teaches you how to live with scars. The oak branches above her creaked in the wind. The silence that followed was peaceful, heavy, and whole. She was about to leave when she noticed something, tire tracks in the soft dirt of the path behind her. Fresh. Deep. She frowned, glancing around. The lot had been empty when she arrived. Probably another visitor, she told herself. Cemeteries weren't private grief. But when she reached her car, there was something about the way the morning light caught on the windshield of a black SUV parked across the way that made her pause. Someone was sitting inside. Windows tinted. Engine idling. Watching? She hesitated. But then the engine revved, and the SUV rolled forward, slow and silent, before disappearing around the bend. She told herself it was nothing. She wanted it to be nothing. But something about that dark shape stayed with her all day. The next Wednesday, it rained again. Torrential, merciless, cold. The kind of Boston rain that soaked you through no matter how much you tried to fight it. She almost didn't go that morning. Almost. But the idea of skipping her visit felt wrong, like breaking a promise to the dead. So, she went anyway. By the time she reached Oak Ridge, her jacket was drenched, her hair plastered to her neck. The grass had turned to mud. But there was Maria's grave, still and waiting. The lilies she'd brought last week were wilted and waterlogged. She replaced them with pink roses, the only flowers she could find at the 24-hour grocery store. "Sorry about the color," she said, raising her voice above the rain. The store was out of lilies. Her fingers shook as she arranged the roses, numb from cold. Then she stayed there, kneeling in the downpour, tears mixing with rain. "I'm so tired, Maria," she confessed. "Tired of pretending I'm fine. Of carrying this. I know you wouldn't want me to feel like this forever, but I can't let go. I can't." Her voice broke. The storm drowned it out, but she spoke anyway. And in that moment, she didn't care if it looked crazy, crying to a headstone in the rain. Because grief, when spoken aloud, was a kind of prayer. And maybe someone was listening. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were right behind her. A shadow fell across the headstone. She turned slowly. A man stood there, tall, shoulders squared beneath a rain-darkened suit, his hair slicked back by water, his expression carved from stone. He held a large black umbrella, but he wasn't offering to share it. His voice, when it came, was deep, quiet. "How did you know her?" For a second, Hannah couldn't breathe. She knew that face, the funeral. The son. The man with the still, cold eyes. "I was her doctor," she said finally, her voice barely audible. Before she stopped herself, swallowed hard. Before she passed. He didn't blink. Didn't move. "Her doctor," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "You come here often?" It wasn't a question. Her pulse jumped. How did he know that? Rain poured between them. She stood slowly, the cold sinking deep into her bones. Yes. I come here. Every Wednesday." His expression flickered, something dark, unreadable. "You should get out of the storm," he said finally. "You'll get sick." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain toward the same black SUV she'd seen before. She stood frozen, her heart pounding, watching the vehicle vanish through the cemetery gates. The rain didn't feel cold anymore. Only strange. Electric. Someone had been watching her all along. Maria's son. That night, back in her apartment, she couldn't shake the memory of his voice. Low. Controlled. Not anger exactly, but something else, something sharper. She made tea she didn't drink. Stared at the wall for hours. Her mind replayed the look in his eyes, the way he'd said, "You come here often," like he already knew the answer. Was he angry? Curious? Suspicious? And why hadn't he demanded to know the truth, that she was the surgeon who couldn't save his mother? As she lay awake listening to the rain on her window, one thought wouldn't leave her. If guilt is a prison, then maybe forgiveness is just someone turning on the light inside it. But what if the person holding that light is the one you hurt? Hannah woke before dawn the next morning, heart racing from a dream she couldn't remember. Rain still pattered softly against her window, the city outside wrapped in gray silence. She sat up, pressing a hand to her chest, trying to slow her breathing. It wasn't just the dream. It was him. The man in the rain. Maria's son. She could still see the way the water had streamed down his face without softening him, how he'd looked at her with that restrained fury, like he was trying to decide whether to hate her or understand her. For the first time in years, the guilt that lived in her chest had a face. At the hospital that day, she went through the motions as usual, consults, charts, surgeries, but her mind kept drifting back to Oak Ridge, to that low, calm voice cutting through the storm. Her friend Megan noticed her distraction while they scrubbed in for an afternoon operation. "You've been weird all day," Megan said, glancing over the top of her mask. "Something happen?" Hannah hesitated. "Not really. Just saw someone I didn't expect to see." Megan arched a brow. That sounded cryptic. A patient's family? Something like that. She changed the subject quickly, grateful when the attending entered and the conversation ended. But inside, her thoughts spun faster than her scalpel. Would he come back next week? Had he recognized her? And if he did, would he blame her for everything? By Tuesday night, she still hadn't found peace. She sat at her kitchen table, medical notes spread out in front of her, but untouched. The glow of the city lights through the window felt cold. Her phone buzzed. Megan again. Megan, are you okay? You've been quiet since last week. Hannah, just tired. Megan, you sure? Because you only go quiet when something's eating you. Hannah, it's nothing I can fix. That was the truth. Some things couldn't be fixed, only faced. She closed her laptop, stood, and walked to the small dresser where she kept the lilies from her last visit pressed between pages of an old anatomy textbook. Their petals were brittle now, pale ghosts of what they'd been. Her mind whispered a single thought: go back. Wednesday came cold and overcast. She left before sunrise again, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. The drive felt longer this time. Every mile stretched between fear and something she couldn't name. When she arrived, the cemetery was half-shrouded in mist. She parked, heart hammering, scanning instinctively for the black SUV. But the lot was empty. The relief was strange. It came tangled with disappointment. She made her way down the path toward Maria's grave. The grass was damp beneath her shoes, the air sharp with cold. She knelt, replacing last week's roses with a small bundle of lilies. Hi again, she whispered, feeling foolish but comforted by the sound of her own voice. You'll probably think I've lost my mind, but it helps talking to you. Her hand lingered on the smooth stone. The silence around her was heavy, waiting. Your son came last week, she said softly. I didn't mean for him to see me. I didn't mean. A voice behind her cut through the air like a blade. You're here again. She turned sharply. He was standing a few yards away. Black coat, dark hair still damp from a morning fog, the same intensity in his eyes. But this time, no umbrella between them. Her throat tightened. I didn't expect to see you. He stepped closer, the wet grass crunching under his shoes. I didn't expect to see you again either. But I suppose we're both creatures of habit. He stopped beside her mother's grave and looked down at it, expression unreadable. You said you were her doctor. Yes. She swallowed. I was the surgeon. He was quiet for a long moment, then still looking at the stone. You were there when she died. There was no accusation in his voice, just truth. Yes. The silence that followed was unbearable. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of wet leaves. When he finally looked at her, his eyes were softer than she expected. Did she suffer? The question hit her like a scalpel to the chest. Hannah's voice broke as she shook her head. No. It was quick. She was asleep when it happened. Peaceful. Something in his face changed. Relief, maybe, or pain she'd kept buried too long. He nodded once, then exhaled slowly. Thank you. She blinked, stunned. For what? For trying to save her. The words shouldn't have undone her, but they did. Her breath caught. She'd imagined this conversation 100 times, him screaming, blaming, hating, but never this. Never gratitude. You don't have to thank me, she whispered. I failed. You didn't. He looked down at the lilies, rain still clinging to their petals. I read the report, he said quietly. I know what happened. No one could have saved her. But you tried. That matters. Her throat closed. For 2 years, no one had said that to her, not like that, not like it meant something. I've seen you here, he continued. Every week. I didn't know who you were at first. Thought maybe you were an old friend. But you kept coming. His gaze lifted to hers, sharp but searching. Why? Hannah hesitated. Then, because I couldn't stop seeing her face. Because I needed to say sorry somewhere she might hear it. He studied her, and for a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The world felt suspended, just wind, fog, and two broken people standing on opposite sides of the same grief. Then he said softly, "My name's Lucas." She nodded. "Hannah." It wasn't much, but it was a start. They stood in silence for another minute before he stepped back. "It's cold. You should go before the rain starts again."
She almost laughed.
"You said that last time." "I was right last time." The corner of his mouth twitched, something like almost a smile, but then it was gone. He turned to leave, then paused. "Do you always come on Wednesdays?" "Yes." He nodded once. "Then maybe I'll see you next Wednesday." He walked away before she could answer, vanishing down the path toward that same black SUV. For a long time, Hannah just stood there, heart pounding, unsure what had just happened. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something she hadn't expected in years. Connection. Back in her car, she sat gripping the steering wheel, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face was pale, damp, her eyes red, but her chest didn't ache the way it usually did. He'd said she hadn't failed. That mattered more than she wanted to admit. She didn't know what next Wednesday would bring. But for the first time since Maria's death, Hannah found herself hoping the storm would return, just to see if he would too. The next Wednesday, she arrived at the cemetery just after dawn. The fog was thick, rolling low across the grass like smoke. Her breath came out in pale clouds, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. She told herself she was there for Maria as always. But the truth hummed quieter beneath that. She wanted to see him. Lucas. He wasn't there when she arrived. The grave was still, the air cold enough to sting. She knelt, replaced the old lilies, and whispered her usual greeting. "Morning, Maria. It's me again. I brought you your favorites." Her voice trembled. "And maybe your son too, if the fog doesn't scare him off." She laughed softly at herself. But then she heard the crunch of footsteps on gravel behind her. "You talk to her a lot." She turned, heart skipping. He was standing a few feet away, dressed in a charcoal coat, black gloves, hair damp with mist. "It helps," she said quietly. "Does she ever answer?" Sometimes she smiled faintly, in the wind, or in the quiet. He gave a small nod. She used to talk to the wind, too. Used to say it carried messages if you listened hard enough. That made her smile, a real one this time. "You sound like her." "Maybe," he said, eyes softening. "Or maybe I'm just the part of her that couldn't stop fighting." They stood there in silence, listening to the fog move through the trees. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small, smooth stone, and placed it on the grave beside her flowers. It was engraved with one word, Semper. "It means always," he said. Italian. "Our family's word. My mother's mostly. She said love was only real if it survived silence." Hannah's throat tightened. "That sounds like her." "You didn't know her long," he said softly, "but I think she'd have liked you." "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it for you," he murmured. "I'm saying it for her." The words landed somewhere deep inside her chest. When they finally left the cemetery, it wasn't planned. It just happened. He offered to walk her to her car, and the path through the fog seemed shorter than usual. At her car, he paused, hands in his coat pockets. "You work at St. Mary's, right?" She blinked. "How did you?" "Your badge. I noticed it last week."
"Right."
"Of course." He smiled faintly, that half-curved mouth that barely revealed emotion. "You save lives for a living, but you still visit the dead." "Maybe that's why," she said softly. "The living remind me of what I couldn't change. The dead remind me why I keep trying." For a moment, neither of them moved. The fog curled between them, white and ghost-like. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "What did you expect?" "Someone colder." Someone who hides behind logic and white coats. And what am I instead? Someone who still believes in ghosts. He said it like a secret. That became their pattern. Every Wednesday, they met at Maria's grave, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours. Sometimes they talked about Maria, sometimes about nothing at all. The cemetery became their strange sanctuary. It was slow, quiet, unspoken. But something between them shifted, like two broken pieces recognizing the shape of the other. One morning, he brought coffee. The next, she brought muffins from a bakery near the hospital. He laughed for the first time that day, a low, unexpected sound that made her heart twist. "You laugh," she said, smiling. "Not often," he replied. "Not for a long time." "You should do it more." "You should stop trying to fix people," he countered gently. "Occupational hazard." "And does it work?"
"Sometimes," she said.
"Sometimes people don't want to be fixed." He looked at her then, really looked, and she knew he wasn't talking about patience anymore. The next week, he didn't come. She waited at the grave until the sky turned gold, her coffee growing cold in her hands. He didn't show. She told herself he was busy, that grief had its own seasons. But something about his absence sat wrong in her gut. 2 days later, she was leaving the hospital when she saw it. The same black SUV parked across the street, tinted windows glinting under the streetlight.
Her heart jumped.
She hesitated, squinting, but before she could approach, the engine roared to life and the car peeled away into the night. The next Wednesday, he was back. But there was a cut on his cheek this time, small, angry, half-healed. "You're hurt," she said immediately. "It's nothing." "That's not nothing. Just business." "What kind of business leaves marks like that?" He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled, not warmly, but as if she'd asked a question he couldn't answer. "The kind that doesn't belong in cemeteries." Her pulse quickened. "Are you in trouble?" He turned away, eyes on the gravestone. "We're all in trouble, Hannah. Some of us just hide it better." Then he changed the subject. But the unease lingered like smoke. That night, she dreamed of him, standing in the fog again, holding an umbrella over her head while the rain fell in sheets around them. But when she reached out, his hand was covered in blood. She woke with a start, chest pounding. For the first time, she wondered if the connection between them wasn't just emotional, but dangerous. And yet, she couldn't stay away. The next time she saw him, his knuckles were bruised, his eyes tired. "Rough week?" she asked carefully. "You could say that. You can talk to me, you know." "No, I can't." He said it gently but firmly, like someone who'd lived too long inside secrets. "You think I judge you?" she asked.
"No."
"I think if you knew who I really am, you'd stop coming here." She didn't answer. She just placed a hand over Maria's name and whispered, "Maybe I already know enough." For a long time, he didn't move. Then, in a voice low and rough as gravel, he said, "You shouldn't." But the look in his eyes betrayed him, the smallest flicker of longing, of someone who hadn't been seen in a very long time. That night, as she drove home, Hannah couldn't shake his words. "If you knew who I really am, you'd stop coming here." But she knew herself, and she knew that something in his darkness was calling to something buried in hers. Because sometimes broken recognizes broken, and love doesn't come wrapped in safety. It comes wrapped in risk. Maybe that's why some people cross our paths, not to heal us, but to hold a mirror to the parts we've been too afraid to face. Would you still let someone in if you sensed danger behind their eyes? Or would you walk away before the heart got involved? The first snow of winter came early that year, silent, soft, and blinding. The cemetery looked different beneath it, transformed from gray to white. Even the grief felt quieter, the kind of peace that only cold could bring. Hannah stood beside Maria's grave, her breath forming white clouds, her gloved hands clutching a single white rose. She hadn't seen Lucas in 2 weeks. He'd vanished again. Each Wednesday she still came, waiting, hoping, fearing. The black SUV hadn't appeared since that last foggy morning, and his number, well, she didn't have it. She wasn't even sure he had a phone. So she waited, whispering into the silence. You'd be angry with him, wouldn't you, Maria? Leaving like that without a word. The wind carried her words away. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. But then again, maybe you'd understand him better than I do. She turned to leave, snow crunching under her boots, and froze. A figure stood at the gate. Dark coat, still posture. Watching. Lucas. He walked toward her, slow, his face shadowed beneath the brim of a hat dusted with snow. Something in his movement felt off, heavier, restrained. When he reached her, he didn't speak right away. You disappeared, she said softly. I had to, he replied, voice rougher than usual. Business. The kind that leaves bruises? The kind that keeps people alive. She frowned. You talk in riddles. Sometimes riddles are safer than truth. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, Lucas, I'm not afraid of the truth. He exhaled slowly, fog curling from his breath. You should be. They walked together in silence, the snow falling thicker now, soft flakes clinging to their coats. When they reached the edge of the cemetery, he stopped. There's something I need to tell you, he said. But you have to promise not to run. Run, she repeated, uneasy. Promise me. I promise. He looked past her, eyes distant. You remember that night my mother died? Her heart clenched. I remember every second. The hospital said it was an accident. A complication. But it wasn't. Hannah blinked. What are you talking about? She was poisoned. The word hit like a thunderclap. She stared at him, unable to process. Poisoned? That's not possible. She was on the operating table. I saw her charts. You saw what someone wanted you to see. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, yellowed, creased. He handed it to her. Hannah opened it, confusion twisting through her gut. It was a lab report dated 2 years ago. The toxicology report on Maria Grimaldero, one she'd never seen. Her eyes scanned the lines. Trace amounts of digoxin exceeding prescribed dosage. Possible non-therapeutic levels detected. Her heart stopped. Digoxin. A cardiac glycoside. The same medication Maria had been on before her surgery. An overdose of it could mimic heart failure. No, she whispered. That's impossible. I verified every dose myself. You did, he said quietly. But someone else didn't. Lucas, I don't, who would? He met her eyes, and in his gaze she saw it. Fury, grief, and something darker. My family runs a business, he said slowly. You've guessed that by now. She said nothing. My father built it. My mother kept it clean. But after she died, everything changed. He looked down at the snow, jaw tightening. Someone wanted her gone, Hannah. And whoever it was, they made sure it looked like your mistake. Her stomach dropped. That's not possible. The review board was paid off. She stared at him, stunned, words tangling in her throat. You're saying someone killed your mother and framed me? Not framed you, he said gently. Used you. Why would anyone? Because you were new. Honest. Easy to manipulate. You'd follow protocol and never question it. Her knees went weak. She gripped the nearest tree for balance, the world spinning. Why are you telling me this now? He hesitated. Because I thought I could let it go. That forgiveness would be enough. But it isn't. I need truth. And you deserve it too. Truth, she repeated hollowly. You think this helps? You've just told me that I've been living a lie for 2 years, that your mother didn't die by chance, that my guilt was not yours to carry, he finished softly. No, Lucas, she whispered, voice shaking.
You don't understand.
If someone tampered with her meds, that means someone inside my hospital did it. He nodded slowly. Yes. And you knew. He didn't answer. Lucas. Her voice hardened. You knew. I had suspicions, he said quietly. But I couldn't prove it. Not until now. And you didn't tell me? I couldn't. You were part of it, at least they thought you were. If they knew I was talking to you, they'd come after both of us. The snow fell harder now, swirling between them like a veil. Who are they? She whispered. People you don't want to know. People who hide behind clean money and hospital boards. And what about you? She asked, her voice trembling. What are you, Lucas? He met her eyes and this time didn't look away. I'm the man they fear most. Something cold and sharp threaded through her chest. She took a step back. You mean? Yes. His voice was low, steady. The Grimaldero family isn't just business. It's the Mafia, Hannah. And now, you're standing in the middle of it. The words crashed through her like a breaking wave. She could barely breathe. You're a Mafia boss? I didn't choose it, he said, pain flashing across his face. But after she died, someone had to take control. To find the ones who did it. I tried to protect you by staying away. But when I saw you at her grave again, I knew you hadn't moved on. Neither had I. Hannah stepped back, tears stinging her eyes. You should have told me. You let me think. That I was just another grieving son? Yes. Would you have come back if you'd known? He asked quietly. Her lips parted, but no answer came.
Because she didn't know.
She wanted to hate him for lying, but part of her still saw the man who brought coffee to a grave, who listened to her pain without judgment. He took a step closer. You deserve to know, Hannah. And now that you do, you need to decide whether to walk away or help me find who killed her. Help you. You have access. Records.
Names.
If there's anyone left inside St. Mary's who was part of it, you could find them. Her head spun. You're asking me to spy on my own hospital? I'm asking you to finish what you started, saving her. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the snow, falling like ash around them. You said you wanted truth, he murmured. This is it. Now what will you do with it? She stared at him, her heart breaking under the weight of it all. Because she knew she couldn't walk away anymore. The next days passed like smoke. Fast, blinding, and suffocating. Hannah barely slept. The revelations gnawed at her, circling her thoughts in endless loops. Poison. Corruption. The hospital. Lucas. The truth had torn through her calm life like a scalpel through silk. At the hospital, she looked at every colleague differently, the smiling nurse, the careful pharmacist, even the chief of medicine. Who among them had signed that false report? Who had looked her in the eye and told her, You did everything right, Dr. Collins, knowing it was all a lie. The weight of it made her hands tremble every time she picked up a scalpel. That night, she sat alone in her office, the city lights glowing cold beyond the rain-streaked windows. She had Maria's toxicology report spread across her desk, cross-referenced with patient records she'd quietly copied. There it was, a discrepancy. A medication order signed by someone who shouldn't have had access. Dr. Gerald Vaughn. Cardiology chief. Her former supervisor. The man who defended her during the review. Her stomach twisted. No, not him. The door creaked open suddenly. She jumped. It was Megan, her friend, holding 2 cups of coffee, a tired smile on her face. You're still here? It's past midnight. Couldn't sleep, Hannah murmured, quickly folding the documents. You look like death, Han. Megan set the coffee down and frowned. What's going on? Hannah hesitated. Megan had been her confidant through residency, her only real friend left at St. Mary's. But the truth sitting on her desk felt too dangerous to share. Just a tough week, she said. Megan studied her face, unconvinced. You've been distant since you met that guy. The one from the cemetery. Hannah froze. How do you? I saw you. A few weeks back. Leaving with him. The room seemed to tilt slightly. You were at Oak Ridge?
Yeah. I visit my dad sometimes.
You didn't tell me who he was. Hannah started then stopped. What could she possibly say? He's the son of a woman I couldn't save and the head of a Mafia family. He's just someone who understands grief. Be careful, Hannah, Megan said softly. People who understand grief usually know how to use it. The words lingered long after Megan left. The next morning, she arrived at work to find two men in suits waiting outside her office. They introduced themselves as hospital auditors, polite smiles, cold eyes. Dr. Collins, we've been reviewing historical cases, one said. We'd like to discuss the Grimaldero incident. Her heart skipped. That case was closed 2 years ago. Yes, the other replied. But certain records have resurfaced. They asked questions that made her blood run cold, about medication handling, about Maria's chart, about her access credentials. They already knew the answers. This wasn't a review. It was an interrogation. When they left, she called Lucas. No answer. She texted. Hannah, they're reopening your mother's case. Something's happening.
Please call me.
No reply. That night, her apartment felt different when she came home.
Too still.
The faint scent of cigar smoke hung in the air, out of place. Her pulse quickened. Someone had been there. She searched every room. Nothing missing, but her laptop was open, a small flash drive inserted. She yanked it out, heart pounding. Outside, a black sedan idled across the street, headlights dimmed. Fear crept up her spine. She locked the doors, closed the blinds, and called Lucas again. This time he answered. Where are you? He demanded immediately.
Home.
But someone's been here. They went through my things. Get out. Lucas. Now, Hannah. She grabbed her bag and ran. By the time she reached the street, his black SUV screeched to a halt in front of her. The passenger door flew open. She climbed in, breathless, trembling. What's happening? They know you're involved, he said tightly, driving fast. Someone at the hospital leaked your name. Vaughn's men. They think you found the report. Vaughn. Yes. His jaw clenched. He was on my father's payroll. They were moving money through medical fronts. Maria found out. That's why she had to die. She stared at him, her stomach hollowing out. And me? You were the scapegoat. The highway lights flashed across his face, sharp lines, haunted eyes. Lucas, what are you going to do? End it.
How?
You don't want to know. If you're talking about killing him, I'm talking about justice, he snapped. Then, quieter. The kind the law won't give her. They drove in silence, the night pressing against the windows. Finally, he pulled over near the edge of the city, a narrow pier that jutted into dark, icy water. He killed the engine. I didn't want this for you, he said, voice low. You should have stayed away. You think I could, after what I found? You could have pretended. That's what everyone else does. And you? He looked at her, eyes glinting with something between anger and grief. I forgot how. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the wind whipping off the water, cold enough to sting. Then she said softly, if we go after him, we do it the right way. I won't be part of more death. He turned toward her, studying her face, the quiet fire in her voice. You still believe in the right way? I have to, she whispered. Otherwise, what's left of me? For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe. Or regret. Then we'll do it your way, he said finally. But it'll make enemies of us both. Then we'll face them together. He almost smiled. You don't even know what that means. Then show me. They didn't know someone had followed them to the pier. From across the road, behind the wheel of a silver sedan, Megan Foster watched through rain-blurred glass, her eyes hard, her expression unreadable. She raised her phone, took a photo and whispered, "Got you." Then she made the call. "It's me," she said quietly. "They're together." "Yeah, she's helping him." She ended the call, her hands shaking, but her eyes never left the car. The next morning, hospital security escorted Hannah off the premises. Her ID was deactivated, her access revoked. Pending investigation, they said. The story hit the local news by nightfall. Cardiac surgeon under review for links to Grimaldiro crime family. Her face, her name, her career, all dragged into the mud. She called Lucas, voice shaking. They know about us. I know. Was it you? No, he said, anger simmering beneath the surface. Someone close to you. Someone feeding Vaughn. Megan, she whispered. Oh, God, it was her. The betrayal hit like a bullet. The one person she trusted. The only friend she had left. Hannah, Lucas said urgently. You need to disappear for a while. They won't stop now. And you? I'll handle Vaughn. Lucas, if you go after him. Then maybe we both finally get peace. Before she could answer, the line went dead. She sat alone in her dark apartment that night, her name flashing across every news channel, her future collapsing around her. For the first time since Maria's death, Hannah Collins, the woman who'd spent her life saving hearts, had no one to save her own. And yet, somewhere inside that darkness, something stirred. A spark. A memory of Maria's voice. Truth doesn't hide forever. And she realized this wasn't the end. Not yet. The world had turned its back on her. Her name was whispered on news anchors' lips like a scandal. Her photograph flashed across headlines with captions she couldn't bear to read. Disgraced surgeon tied to Mafia family. Her phone buzzed endlessly, journalists, investigators, even old patients who didn't know what to believe. But the only voice she wanted to hear was silent. Lucas hadn't called in 3 days. Her apartment became a cave of shadows, the curtains drawn tight, her life reduced to the dim light of a laptop and the hum of the refrigerator. Every corner smelled of fear and burnt coffee. But grief, Hannah had learned, is like surgery. You can only endure so much bleeding before you decide to stop it yourself. On the 4th night, something inside her shifted. She opened her laptop and stared at the files she'd stolen from St. Mary's before they revoked her access. Hospital logs, medication charts, signatures. Her eyes fell on Maria Grimaldiro's chart once more. She'd memorized every detail, but tonight, she noticed something she hadn't before. A nurse's initials at the bottom of the medication slip. One she hadn't recognized before. MF. Her heart stuttered. Megan Foster. The betrayal that had haunted her was suddenly sharp, clear, undeniable. Her friend. The woman who'd brought her coffee, laughed beside her in the cafeteria, held her hand during long shifts. The one who said people who understand grief usually know how to use it. She'd been right, because she'd been using it all along. Hannah's hands shook as she scrolled through old security logs. Megan's ID had accessed Maria's file hours before the operation, without authorization. There it was. The smoking gun. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She should have felt vindicated, but instead, she felt hollow. Because beneath the rage, there was heartbreak. She'd lost her career, her peace, and her trust, all because she believed in the wrong person. But then she remembered Lucas's voice the night he'd pulled her from her apartment. "You were the scapegoat," and Maria's soft, fading words from that day in the oar. "You have a good heart, Doctor. Don't let it harden." Hannah took a deep breath, her reflection staring back from the laptop screen. Pale, tired, but not broken. "Okay," she whispered to herself. "Let's finish this." She copied every file, every timestamp, every signature to a flash drive. Then she wrote a letter, brief, direct, sealed in an envelope addressed to Detective Rowe, the only officer who'd handled Maria's case 2 years ago. If anything happened to her, he'd know where to look. When she left her apartment, dawn was bleeding into the sky. The city was still asleep. She drove across the river to a small diner that opened early, one she knew Lucas sometimes used for his quiet meetings. She waited in the corner booth, coffee cooling untouched before her, hands wrapped around the flash drive like it was a heartbeat. He came just after 7. Black coat, dark circles beneath his eyes. He looked older, wearier. But when he saw her, his face softened. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. "You neither," she countered. "But here we are." He looked at her hands, then at her face. "You found something." "Megan," she said simply. It was her. She accessed Maria's file before the surgery. She was working for Vaughn.
His jaw tightened.
"I'll take care of her." "No," Hannah said sharply. "That's over. No more blood, Lucas." "You think she'll confess out of guilt?" "No," she said. "She'll confess because she doesn't know I have proof. And because I know how to make her afraid of the right person this time." He leaned back, studying her. "You're different," he said softly. "Harder." "No," she said, meeting his eyes. "Just done being afraid." For a moment, the world outside the diner seemed to disappear. The city noise faded. Only their breaths filled the space. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers.
Warm.
"Steady." "I don't know how this ends, Hannah," he said. "People like me don't get happy endings." "Maybe not," she whispered, her thumb brushing his knuckles. "But maybe we can steal one moment that feels like one." Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, fragile but real. "If this goes wrong." "It won't," she said, and for the first time, she almost believed it. They left the diner as the city woke. Hannah's plan was simple but risky. Confront Megan, record the confession, and deliver the evidence directly to Detective Rowe. By the time the sun was fully up, they were parked across from St. Mary's Hospital. Hannah watched Megan exit the building in her pale blue scrubs, heading for the side lot. Hannah's hands trembled slightly on the door handle. "She'll talk to me if I'm alone." Lucas frowned. "That's not safe." "Neither is standing still." She stepped out before he could stop her. The cold air bit through her coat. Megan spotted her instantly, eyes widening. "Hannah," she called, nervous laughter in her voice. "You shouldn't be here. You're not supposed to." "Save it." Hannah cut in, her tone icy. "We both know why they fired me." Megan's smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie. I found her access logs. You altered Maria's file. You dosed her with digoxin. And you let me take the blame." Megan's face went pale, her lips trembling. Hannah, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. Vaughn said she'd be fine, that it would just scare her." "Scare her? You killed her." Hannah's voice broke through the parking lot like thunder. Megan glanced around nervously, lowering her voice. "If you go to the police, they'll kill us both." Then you'd better start talking before they get here. A black SUV pulled up just then Lucas's, its tinted window rolling down slightly. His presence was a silent warning. Megan's eyes darted between Hannah and the car, panic rising. "Oh God, you brought him?" "You already brought his mother into this," Hannah said coldly. Megan started to cry. "Please, I didn't mean to. Vaughn made me do it. He said if I didn't, he'd ruin me." "Then you'll tell that to the police," Hannah said, pulling out her phone. She tapped record. Every word. Through her tears, Megan nodded, hands trembling. By the time they reached Detective Rowe's office an hour later, the recording was secure, the flash drive in her coat pocket. The truth was finally in daylight. The detective listened in silence, eyes narrowing as he replayed the confession. "You did good, Dr. Collins," he said finally. "This will be enough to bring Vaughn down. Maybe more." Hannah let out a long, shaking breath. "I just want Maria's name cleared." "It will be." When they left, Lucas slipped his hand into hers quietly. "You did it," he said. She smiled faintly. "We did it." He looked at her like he'd never seen sunlight before. "No," he said softly. "You did. You saved her twice." That night, standing outside the hospital, the air felt different, crisp, clean, almost forgiving. Hannah tilted her face to the sky, feeling the cold wind brush her cheeks. For the first time, she didn't see Maria's last moments when she closed her eyes.
She saw peace.
The news broke before sunset. Chief of Cardiology under federal investigation for homicide and fraud. Gerald Vaughn's photograph flashed across every screen in Boston. Inside the hospital, phones rang nonstop. Outside, cameras swarmed the gates. Hannah watched it unfold from a hotel room window with Lucas standing behind her, arms crossed, silent. "It's done," she said softly. "Not yet," he replied. She turned. His eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. "They'll arrest him," she argued. "Rowe has the confession, the logs. Men like Vaughn don't wait to be arrested. They erase the evidence first." And as if to prove him right, her phone buzzed. "Unknown number. You shouldn't have gone to the police." Then another. "You think you've won? Check your car." Her blood ran cold. Lucas was already moving. He grabbed her wrist, pulled her toward the door. "We're leaving." They reached the parking garage behind the hotel just as the night wind began to howl. Hannah's car sat near the exit, a thin layer of dust on the windshield, except for a single, clean handprint on the driver's door. Lucas swore under his breath. "Back away." He crouched, scanned the undercarriage, and froze. A small black box blinked faintly red. "A tracker," he muttered. "Maybe worse." He yanked her behind a concrete pillar, dialing a number. "Marco, get here now. Level C, bring the kit." Hannah stared at him, her heart pounding. "You have a bomb disposal team?" He gave a humorless smile. "Occupational hazard." Within minutes, 2 men in dark coats arrived, worked quickly, and carried the device away in a sealed case. Lucas stayed beside her, jaw tight. "You see why I said it wasn't over? They could have killed us. They still might." But when he looked at her, something in his expression softened. "You did good, Hannah. You were brave." "Brave is just another word for terrified with purpose," she said. He almost laughed. "Then terrified suits you." They didn't go back to the hotel. Lucas drove her through empty streets to the Grimaldiro estate, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, hidden behind wrought iron gates and whispering pines. Inside, marble halls stretched like veins of ice. "You live here?" she asked quietly. "I exist here," he corrected. He led her into a study filled with old books and the faint scent of cedar and gun oil. Firelight flickered against his face, carving shadows beneath his eyes. Vaughn's people will come tonight, he said. They'll try to destroy everything that ties them to the hospital. Then we warn the police. They won't get here in time. He turned toward her. You can still leave. I can get you out of the city before. Stop, she said firmly. I'm not running again. Silence stretched between them, thick, charged, final. He stepped closer. You don't understand what's coming. Maybe not, she whispered, but I understand you. You've been fighting ghosts since the day she died. So have I. Maybe this is how we stop. For the first time, his composure cracked. If something happens to you, then you'll keep your promise to your mother. That broke him. His hands came up to her face, fingers trembling. He kissed her like a confession, slow, fierce, desperate. All the silence of the last 2 years poured into that single moment. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. Stay behind me, he whispered. The first shot shattered the window. Glass exploded inward, the firelight snuffed by a sudden gust. Lucas shoved her down, drew a gun from his coat, returned fire into the dark. Shadows moved outside, 3, maybe 4 men, all dressed in black. Hannah's breath came in shallow bursts as she crawled toward the desk. There's another door. No time, he barked. One of the gunmen burst through the shattered frame. Lucas fired once. The man fell. The second came from the hall. Hannah grabbed a brass lamp and swung with all her strength. It connected with a sickening crack. The man collapsed. Her hands shook violently, but she didn't drop the lamp. Lucas glanced at her, a flash of pride in his eyes. Remind me never to argue with you again.
Deal.
They backed toward the staircase. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Someone had called the police after all. But another figure stepped into the entryway. Gerald Vaughn himself, flanked by 2 armed guards, calm as if he'd come for a meeting. Dr. Collins, he said smoothly. You should have stayed in your lane. My lane doesn't include murder, she snapped. No, he said, just naivety. You could have had your career back. Instead, you chose him. His gaze slid to Lucas. Your mother would be disappointed, boy. Lucas's jaw clenched. Say her name again. Maria, Vaughn sneered. Soft-hearted fool. She thought this family could buy redemption. Lucas fired. The bullet grazed Vaughn's shoulder. Chaos erupted. One guard lunged. Another shot cracked. The world dissolved into noise and smoke. Hannah ducked behind the staircase, ears ringing. Then silence. She looked up. Lucas stood over Vaughn, gun still raised, chest heaving. The older man was on the floor, blood seeping through his white coat. Do it, Vaughn hissed. You're your father's son after all. For a long, endless moment, Lucas didn't move. His finger hovered over the trigger. Then Hannah's voice cut through the quiet. Lucas, don't. He turned toward her. Tears glimmered in her eyes, not of fear, but of belief. If you kill him, you lose everything she loved about you. The sirens were close now, flashing lights bleeding through the shattered windows. Lucas lowered the gun. It fell from his hand with a dull thud. Vaughn laughed once, bitter and broken. You think mercy saves you? No, Lucas said quietly. It saves her. The police stormed in seconds later, guns drawn, shouting orders. Hannah raised her hands. Lucas did the same. Vaughn's men were cuffed, the room flooding with blue light. Detective Rowe pushed through the chaos, eyes wide. You two all right? Hannah nodded, her knees finally giving way as Lucas caught her. Hours later, at the hospital, the same hospital where it all began, Hannah sat beside Lucas in the emergency bay. His arm was bandaged, his eyes half closed from exhaustion. Rowe approached quietly. Vaughn's in custody. Megan's giving a full statement. You both cleared Maria's name tonight. Hannah exhaled shakily. She can rest now. So can you, Rose said gently. When the detective left, Lucas turned to her. You still believe in doing things the right way? I have to. Then keep believing for both of us. She smiled through tears, brushing a hand against his cheek. Always. Outside, dawn began to rise over Boston, painting the hospital walls gold. For the first time, Hannah didn't see tragedy in that building. She saw rebirth. 6 months later, spring returned to Boston. The city had healed slowly from the storm that had swept through its shadows. The Grimaldero trial had ended in a flurry of headlines and testimony. Vaughn's sentenced to life, his network exposed piece by piece. Megan Foster, after weeks of cooperation, was granted immunity in exchange for evidence that dismantled the hospital's corruption. For Hannah, the story ended where it had begun, with silence. But this silence was different. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was peace. She stood at the edge of Oak Ridge Cemetery, the grass now vibrant green, small white blossoms scattered across Maria's grave. The stone gleamed in the morning light, newly polished, its inscription changed. Maria Teresa Grimaldero, beloved mother. Her heart healed others. Hannah traced the words gently, the way she had so many times before. Her tears were soft this time, not of grief, but gratitude. You're free now, she whispered. And so am I. Behind her, footsteps approached, steady, familiar. She turned to see Lucas, dressed simply, no more dark suits or guards. Just a man, his eyes softer than they'd ever been. He placed a small bouquet of lilies beside hers. She'd have liked this, he said. She'd have liked seeing you without a bulletproof car. He smiled faintly. I sold them all. I'm trying something new. A quiet life. A clean one. They stood side by side, the spring wind ruffling their coats. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. What will you do now? She asked. My mother owned land in Florence. I'm restoring it, turning it into something she always wanted. What's that? He smiled. A vineyard. She laughed softly. You making wine? That's something I'd pay to see. You could, he said quietly, if you ever wanted to come see it for yourself. The invitation lingered between them like sunlight on water, gentle, not demanding. She hesitated. And you? You'll really walk away from all of it? The name, the power? Power is just another kind of cage, he said. I've lived in it long enough. I think it's time I found something worth keeping instead. And have you? She asked softly. He looked at her then, really looked, and the answer was written in his silence. Later that afternoon, they walked the path leading down to the cemetery gates. Hannah paused beneath the old oak tree where she'd first knelt 2 years ago in the rain, where her story had begun. The bark was damp beneath her fingers, but it no longer felt like a wound. It felt like home. When I first came here, she said quietly, I thought forgiveness meant forgetting. But now I think it just means remembering without bleeding. Lucas stepped beside her, his voice low. You gave her peace. You gave me truth. Maybe it's time you gave yourself something too. She smiled. And what's that? A future. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small, worn envelope. Inside was a plain ticket, one way to Florence. Tucked behind it, a photo of a hillside vineyard drenched in gold light, vines curling beneath an old stone farmhouse. The first vines go in next month, he said. It could use a doctor who knows how to heal things that can't speak. I thought you were good at metaphors, she said, laughing softly. Maybe I just learned from you. Her hand brushed his, tentative at first, then certain. One day, she said, folding the envelope carefully. Maybe. That's enough, he whispered. 2 weeks later, Hannah gave her final lecture at St. Mary's, the first one she'd been allowed to give since her reinstatement. The auditorium was packed. Interns, residents, nurses, even Rose sitting quietly in the back. She stood before them, calm, poised, and whole. "Medicine isn't about winning," she said. "It's about listening. Sometimes, the heart tells you more in silence than in sound." Her gaze swept the crowd. 2 years ago, I lost a patient who taught me that saving a life isn't always about stopping death. It's about carrying forward the truth they leave behind. The room was still. For a moment, it felt like Maria herself was there, smiling in the back row. When it ended, the applause was quiet but genuine. Megan waited outside the hall, her expression uncertain. "Hannah," she began, "I don't expect forgiveness." Hannah studied her for a long moment, then said softly, "Then take peace instead. It's lighter to carry." Megan's eyes filled. "Thank you. Just live better," Hannah said gently. "That's all the apology I need." That evening, she returned once more to Oak Ridge. The sun was setting low, the sky bleeding orange and violet across the marble stones. She sat cross-legged beside Maria's grave, watching the light shift through the trees. "It's funny," she whispered, "how life circles back. I came here to apologize, and now I come to say thank you." A soft wind stirred the flowers. Somewhere above, a bird sang, "You taught me that hearts don't stop beating when the body does. They just move to the people who loved you enough to keep listening." She smiled through quiet tears. "And I think someone else taught me that love doesn't need to be safe to be real." Her phone buzzed. A text from Lucas. "Vines go in tomorrow. Sunrise looks different here." She typed back, "Send me a picture." Then, after a pause, "Maybe one day I'll see it for myself." His reply came seconds later. "I'll keep a glass waiting." She laughed softly, the sound carrying through the stillness. As she stood to leave, the sky deepened into dusk, the first stars appearing like tiny heartbeats across the heavens. The last thing she did before walking away was place a single white lily on Maria's stone. It glowed faintly in the dying light, pure, eternal. And for the first time, the whisper that came through the wind didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like, "Thank you." Sometimes healing doesn't mean erasing the past. It means learning to live alongside it, letting love grow where loss once lived. If you could speak to the person who changed you the most, for better or worse, what would you say now? The vineyard in Florence stretched wide under the Italian sun. Rows of vines shimmered like emerald ribbons. A small figure in a white sundress moved between them, a straw hat shading her face. Lucas stood at the terrace, watching her place a hand on a newly planted vine. "You'll grow strong," Hannah murmured to the plant, smiling. "You've got good roots." Lucas walked toward her, his hand brushing hers. "Everything does, eventually." She looked up at him, sunlight dancing in her eyes. "Even broken hearts?" He smiled. "Especially those." The wind carried laughter through the vineyard, and somewhere in that sound, soft, fleeting, infinite, the echo of Maria's voice seemed to linger. Truth doesn't hide forever. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a blessing. Sometimes the ones we lose don't really leave us. They stay, in the lessons they taught us, in the hearts they touched, and in the courage they leave behind for us to find. Hannah carried guilt for years, thinking she'd failed. Lucas carried anger, thinking forgiveness was weakness. But together, they discovered that healing doesn't come from revenge, it comes from remembering with love. Your story might help someone else find peace, too. If this story touched your heart, take a moment right now to reflect. If you could speak to the one person who changed you forever, for better or worse, what would you say to them today? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you felt the emotion in this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another journey of love, loss, and redemption. Because sometimes all it takes is one story to remind us that broken hearts can still learn to beat again.